Correct.
I don't know much about the north shelter.
Okay.
Mostly with the south shelter. Can't answer.
All right. Well, so then the system that's being used there is one where there's a number of different people that have keys that are considered responsible people. So if there was an emergency, a tornado warning or something, they would go open the shelter so that people can go there. And so, you know, there might be some perception out there in the public that like these restrooms are there, and whenever somebody's wandering around out in the park and they want to go to the restroom, they could use those. Well, they can't. They're locked. And so the reason that the state has the law that indicates that they're not necessary is that typically, you know, most of you are probably all Minnesotans. You know that tornado situations usually are done within half an hour. And so maybe if you stay for the full tornado warning, you're there an hour and a half, and for the most part, you don't need to have facilities typically. And so that the states, you know, indicated that it wasn't any longer required that you put them in. And so, I mean, there are some things going on out there in Rolling Hills that the residents have been coming to us asking us to help, and there's of course very little we can do. It's a privately owned enterprise. It's not under our control, but we did want to make sure that they, at least, as in Maplewood, everything's just a little bit better when you live here, and if you have to go to the bathroom while you're waiting for a tornado to go by, they can go. And so that's kind of where we're at on that process. During the time that we were talking, and let's see, is there anyone else who wants to speak? Otherwise, I'll close the public hearing. Okay, that's closed. During the time that we were talking, I took a quick review of all of the items from the first go-around and the second go-around, and quite frankly, I only found about 3 or 4 that, in my opinion, you know, wouldn't need to be there anymore. And so I'll just throw these out. If we go to page, it's packet number 55 of 229. And excuse me, no, that's right. I mean, the first 2 really have to do with right when the park was being, you know, started and built, and so they don't really apply to anything anymore. Yes, Mr. Nephew.
The one, I agree with that, just with the understanding that there's one of the clauses in the second CUP that talks about the carport and parking structures, and so that part of it of having gravel or similar material or concrete or whatever.
Well, we'll see if I catch that when I get to that part. But in my mind, we didn't need to have 1 and 2, and we don't need to have 6 and 7. One is no construction grading, which there is no construction grading, and then it talks about the private sanitary sewer water main streets shall be constructed, and I mean they're already constructed, and so it didn't seem like that was important. Then I jumped down to 14. But this appears to maybe be the only item that actually talks about the sanitary facilities. And Tom, is there another spot, or is this it?
That's it.
Okay, so we certainly need to retain that, and we need, I think, to be able to retain the fact that if there are changes made by either the state or other entities that have control having to do with manufactured home parks, and these shelters, that like if there are upgrades that are required, that they need to make the upgrades. And so I'm not sure, you know, this kind of speaks to the construction of the shelter, and what we really need is an item that speaks to the continual maintenance of the shelter at this point, in my opinion. And so that would be one slightly gray area. And then I put a question mark by 18, because it talks about the sale of mobile homes shall be limited to those owned by the park residents and those sold by the park owner for placement in the park. And so I wasn't sure that that met the needs of all people, the park owners and the residents of the park. That's why I put a question mark by it. And so is that the way that it works? Is that if there's somebody's going to sell something, it's either somebody who owns the home or the park owner in one way or the other comes into possession and they sell the home, versus somebody like going to another manufactured home park and buying one and bringing it over?
Mr. Mayor, I know when that one was discussed at the Planning Commission, they did revise that, and I'm looking for that current language. It should be in the combined motion.
Okay.
I don't know what number that is yet.
couldn't find it in the new one. I mean, there was the change that allowed used homes.
Where is it? What number? It's not in there?
I
Okay.
didn't find that one either.
All right. So I'm going to, I mean, and I'm kind of asking because we have the sales, or the owner's representative here, and so I just would want to make sure that that statement is accurate as far as it says, sales of mobile homes shall be limited to those owned by park residents and those sold by the park owner for placement in the park. And so that only has two instances of an ability to have a new home come into the park, and I'm just not certain that that's the only two ways that they come in the park.
It's not. I mean, my understanding is that was removed at the July
Number 6.
hearing, but licensed dealers
Number
can
6
hold homes in the
combined.
park. I believe that relates to in-park sales only. And the third category are sales by licensed manufactured home dealers.
So it sounds like we can just leave that one out.
Okay?
Like it's not needed.
And the next two that I left out were 23 and 24 on page 57. And we do have to have a statement about the reviewing of the conditional use permit, but this was the one that was written in the very beginning. And then the 24 talks about things that are going on during the construction of the park, which obviously happened a long time ago. And then, quite frankly, in looking at it, every single thing that was
22.
in, single thing that was in the second edition, I couldn't see any reason that they shouldn't still be in there. So those ones that I went through and said, these don't need to be here anymore, those would be the ones that I'd leave out, and I just leave all the rest of them as they are. I mean, and what we'd have to do now, Tom, is look at your sheet and really see how many are in there, and I don't know that, at least at the moment, we can go through and kind of go across and see which ones got carried through and which ones didn't. And so I could make a motion that would just say that we want these conditions in, but the problem with that is that there might be some modified ones in the latest edition that I wouldn't be able to catch by that kind of motion. And so I'm not quite sure what to do. Mr. Nephew?
I had a question on the first edition, condition number 22. It said the number of mobile homes shall not exceed 246. Is that still in there somewhere? And one of the reasons I bring that up is that the resident, Mr. Ruby, mentioned a larger number than that for the number of families that he said were living there currently. I guess that's only for the first edition, though, not the entire park. Is there a cap or a number on how many homes are allowed on the entire park?
There has been a cap created. In the first edition, it would be on, I think it's here noted on page 3 of our report, or 57 of 229. The number of mobile homes shall not exceed 246. For the second edition, I thought there was a similar statement, but initially when the development was approved, it was for a set number of homes. And it has happened over the course of time that they found a spot to put another one, then they'd come to the council and get that number increased by 1 or 2. So I guess I don't see it here. I don't have the file with me to tell you what that number would be for the second edition.
From staff standpoint, is that something where we should have a specific number, or where it's dictated sufficiently by all the setbacks and so forth that we don't really need to bother with that?
I think it's set in the ground out there. I mean, we can come up with that number, but
Sure.
it is what it is currently. I just don't know what that total number is.
That's fine. Well, I mean, I have no problem removing a clause if it's really extraneous at this point.
How do we want to handle this, council?
I think we should offer a motion to identify the specific clauses that we'd want to put back in.
Well, so that means we have to go through the revised one, or just go through the two?
I would say that what we should do is take the revised one and say that we want these ones to be added back in, that we would take out of the first two.
Well, so I don't want to sit here on our meeting time and try to compare these different things. And so if we want to send Tom off to the back room, and he can compare and come back and tell us then, which things out of the first two additions are not in the third one, then we'd at least have a list that we can look at and say, we want to add these back in then. And so if we want to table this for further down the agenda to give somebody enough time to kind of do some comparisons, we can do that.
That would be fine. I mean, I think from the list that you went through matched up with what I'd come up with as well, though, so I think it's largely already here. So, I could offer a motion, making it up on the fly. I think that would cover it pretty well.
Go for it.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Nephew.
So I'll offer a motion to approve the CUP with these revisions, reincorporating these paragraphs from the original CUPs. Those would be, we were going to change the Clause 10 of the revised combined motion to specify that toilets shall be maintained in both the north and south shelters.
With stalls.
With stalls, toilets and stalls. And I think that would cover everything that came out of 14. I think we concluded that the other ones that were missing ahead of that are not needed, so we're going to remove that one. We want to have a clause added for review in 1 year, let's say, the standard 1 year, and then the usual language that we have in CUPs about that, so that in the future that can be deferred to longer times. From what is currently in paragraph 24 of the first edition, I think we should include the requirements of a paved driveway and off-street parking pad and the sidewalk requirements. In case any changes to the park in the future, that those would still be maintained. So that would be sections A, 1, and 2 out of item 24. And B also could be kept in case they still, or in the future, would use any model homes. And paragraph, or condition 5 of the second edition covers some of the same language, so whatever, if it's briefer to use that, that would be fine. And I believe that that's it.
Second.
Do we miss anything, Kath?
Okay, so Mr. Nephew has made a motion, which in a moment we're all going to understand. And so it was seconded by Mr. Copen. And so, John, would you be able to, so we have, the basis of your motion is the revised combined unit. So everything that's in there is in there. And so in 10, we added in that the north, we're talking about the north and the south shelters.
Shelter restrooms.
And then there was talk about actually having stalls. I presume that we're talking about in a situation where there's more than one facility. I don't know that there is more than one toilet or whatever in some of these.
There might just be one in like the corner of the room.
And so
we just want it to be screened off from the rest of the room.
Okay. And so then I'm looking for just a quick way to repeat, without having to repeat every single word you just said, the
driveway parking pit.
and so which number is that?
Let's say 24, paragraph 24, or condition 24, striking the first line about after April 24th, and have it say, the following improvements must be installed within 60 days after a mobile home is placed on a lot, or